Good morning, everyone. Well, with Palm Sunday yesterday, we enter into Holy Week. And I thought that what I'd do is work through maybe the last few days in the life of Christ. And although the Bible doesn't really give us a very good directive in terms of what was Monday, and which was Tuesday, and which was Wednesday, and so forth, it gives us a series of events, and whether they in fact are in the same sequence in which they really happened is not important. For example, Jesus arriving into Jerusalem on the back of a donkey, as we celebrate yesterday, doesn't really fit into the sequence in terms of the Last Supper. So that's not as critical. What is important is that we give recognition to the events. So today being the Monday, leading up to obviously the death of Christ later in the week, let's just examine some of the events that occurred. In chapter 10 of John's Gospel, and that's where I'll start, and we'll work through. If you want to read through from chapter 10 onwards in John's Gospel, I think it'd be helpful in terms of your preparation for Holy Week. Jesus says, whoever climbs over the gate instead of entering, whoever climbs over the fence instead of entering through the gate is a thief and a robber. In other words, there's only one proper way to get into heaven, and that's to actually go through the proper gate. And Jesus says, I am the gate, and I am the good shepherd. It's quite interesting that we encounter within this passage also lots of references about Pharisees wanting to pick up stones and throw them at Jesus. There's lots of opportunities for people to pick up stones and throw them at people. And then I find it very interesting that when Jesus eventually is put to death, there's no mention of stones being thrown. And it's almost, I think, that when stones are thrown, it's because things are done as a mob justice, and that there's no real trial that takes place. And if we see the death of Stephen, which we'll encounter in a couple of weeks, and that's a prime example, that Stephen was put to death, we don't see any evidence of a proper trial having happened. In chapter 11 of John's Gospel, we see the raising of Lazarus. In other words, that was Jesus showing that he had power over death, and that was a bit of a shock, and people were obviously very strongly influenced by this. Now, the response of the Pharisees was to say, if we leave him alone, all will believe in him, and the Romans will come and take away both our land and our nation. And that is their prime motive. They're not concerned so much about what Jesus is saying, but that if he carries on saying it, they're going to lose all their possessions and stuff. So it's very much greed and possessions and so forth that motivates them. And I think this is what we need to follow as we go through Holy Week. You have a wonderful day. Keep yourself safe. God bless. Bye-bye.